If I wasn't in the room with my guys, I would walk into the room. I would look them all in the eye and say, fellas, I made a mistake. This is what happened. This is what I did wrong. This is what I'm going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again. But right now, we need to fix it.
Put that coffee down.
Creators are leaders. Be careful what kind of leaders you're producing here.
Helen, we're both in sales. Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
They realized that to be in power, you didn't need guns or money or even numbers. You just needed the will to do what the other guy wouldn't.
I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
Well, hello there, friend. Welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Bradley Hartman. Now, I'm excited and honored to share my conversation today with Mr. Zac Elenchin. Zac is from the great state of Pennsylvania, and in high school, he played football, he wrestled, and he powerlifted. After graduation, he joined the United States Army as a combat medic. He attended Air Assault School and earned the Expert Field Medical Badge. Shortly thereafter, he did a 9-month rotation at Camp Arifjan in Kuwait in support of Operation Spartan Shield from 2017 to 2018. After returning from Kuwait, he attended the Expeditionary Combat Medic course in Fort Sam Houston, Texas. He was then assigned to the 1st Armored Division Combat Aviation Brigade and deployed to Afghanistan in 2019 in support of Operation Freedom's Sentinel. After 7 years, Zac was medically retired from the Army in 2022. He then joined 84 Lumber and became a manager trainee, and after 4 months, he was promoted to be the co-manager of the Mars, Pennsylvania location. In this conversation, we talk about leadership, we talk about management, we talk about building trust quickly, but where we spend the most meaningful part of our conversation is in between these two periods, between when Zac was part of the U.S. Army and when he became a manager at 84 Lumber. How he dealt with his post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, and then how he collaborated with his father, Will Elenchin, to write a book titled PTSD and Post-Traumatic Growth in the Warrior Class, a tactical primer for students and practitioners in military, police, and medicine. Thank you for making time to listen to this conversation because it is powerful. I believe it will change you in at least some small way. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Mr. Zac Elenchin of 84 Lumber. Mr. Zac Elenchin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, appreciate you making time. Dude, we're going to jump in. We're going to jump into one of my favorite questions, a fun one. Let's talk about leadership movies, Zac. Do you have a favorite leadership movie? What is it? And I want you to be prepared to defend it as well.
All right. Yeah, I'd have to go with the movie Saving Private Ryan with Tom Hanks about the World War II war movie where members of the 75th Ranger Regiment were sent to essentially get a member of the 101st Airborne Division where his 5 brothers were fallen in battle, and it follows their journey throughout it.
Is there a specific scene in there that really resonates? I know, who do we have in there? I know we got Matt Damon. I know we got Tom Hanks. Who else is in there?
Matt Damon, Tom Hanks, Vin Diesel's in there.
Vin Diesel, I thought he was only making car movies specifically.
Yeah, no, he branched out for this one. This was pre-Fast and Furious, so no, he was doing war movies back then. But yeah, I would say if I had to choose a specific scene that really resonated with me, it's when the Rangers are assaulting 2 machine gun nests and there's a really intense battle and their medic gets injured. He takes a round into the abdomen and he bleeds out and passes away. And they end up capturing 2 of these German soldiers, and Tom Hanks' entire platoon, like everybody's kind of arguing back and forth and deciding what to do with them, whether they let them go, whether they kill them, whether they do whatever. And Tom Hanks is completely calm during it. And during the movie, they all try to guess what Tom Hanks' profession is stateside.
Oh,
They
okay.
all know he's a captain of the Rangers overseas, but they all try to say, are you a businessman? Are you a contractor? What do you do? And that scene when everybody's screaming and almost going at each other, he's completely calm and he tells them he's a school teacher and he coaches baseball. And then he talks very compassionately to everybody, no matter what side they were on, saying, you know, I know this is a dangerous mission and we're losing guys, but this is what we have to do to get back home.
Mm-hmm.
So that scene kind of epitomizes leadership for me.
How would you describe maybe your leadership journey? If you think about, my guess is there's kind of a transition. You were in the military for 7 years. Maybe your leadership journey from when you went in to the military and by the time you got out, in terms of leadership and just the experiences that you've had, and we'll go into some of them there, how would you describe your own leadership journey?
So with my leadership journey, I always knew that I wanted to be in the military. Ever since I was a kid, that was the first thing I wanted to be. Some people want to be a professional football player. They want to be an astronaut. They want to be whatever. I wanted to be a soldier. And when I first went into the Army, I honestly didn't have the mindset of I'm going to be a leader. I had the mindset of I want to, you know, do my part, serve my country, and do whatever's needed of me. So I joined as a medic, and it's funny that I didn't think I was going to be a leader because at the age of 20, I was a team leader. So a team leader, you're in charge of 3 or 4 guys, and you're responsible for their well-being, their performance, everything. So I would say I got a head start as opposed to most other people because, you know, 20 is a pretty young age to be a leader in the most pure sense in the military. And then from there, it just went on and on. I was a squad leader. I was expeditionary combat medic. I was a task force senior medic. I was a platoon sergeant. I was a brigade medical operations sergeant. And so the things that I kind of learned while I was in these leadership positions, I made plenty of mistakes. You know, there's not a leader out there that's perfect. There's not a single one. But what separates the good leaders from the leaders you don't really want to emulate is what do they do when they make a mistake? And so when I would realize that I did something wrong or I wasn't doing something good enough, I became pretty obsessed with fixing that and continuing to improve whatever processes I had to better take care of my guys and better effectively accomplish whatever mission I had. It was the same thing stateside versus overseas. Stateside is more of a training and preparedness cycle as you train to go overseas. Overseas, you are executing a mission.
Yeah. Zac, I'm fascinated to hear maybe what was your approach when you did make a mistake? Did you have a go-to setup, situation, a few lines where you acknowledge you screwed up? And the reason I ask is for a long time, my wife, who's also a colleague of mine, we worked together, she would point out accurately, as it turns out, I was very poor. And this is largely to say I didn't do it. I would never apologize. I struggled to apologize. And as I've matured in my age, Zac, I've realized that is a key part of acknowledging when a mistake has been made. And I feel like I've made a lot of strides there. But there is also this hesitancy, I think, for leaders, because as leaders who have an ego, who want to be trusted by the people who are following them, there is the risk of constantly telling people you're screwing up. How did you, whether when you were 20 or as you progressed in your career, how did you communicate to everybody when it was obvious or non that, hey, a mistake has been made, I didn't do my job, I will do better? What did that sound like?
Well, I already said there were plenty of times that it happened, and what I would do, I kept it very simple. I like to try to be a very straightforward person. So I would, if I wasn't in the room with my guys, I would walk into the room. I would look them all in the eye and say, fellas, I made a mistake. This is what happened. This is what I did wrong. This is what I'm going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again. But right now we need to fix it. And then I would lay out the plan of fixing whatever happened and we would get to work. So I wouldn't draw it out by any means, but I also would never hide it. If I made a mistake, they knew.
Yeah. Well, I think when I hear you say that, all of it sounds like common sense. Yeah, of course. How else would you go about it? I made a mistake. My fault. I apologize. I have a plan to fix it. Let's go over the plan. Let's get to work. And yet, for a lot of folks, including myself, I think who are listening, sometimes that structure that gets delayed or, we find reasons not to address it as soon as possible. So I think there's a lot of value in just you sharing that with us here. As I'm thinking about you moving from high school and then into the Army, are there earned insights that you have along the way that, kind of going back to the original story you talked about, or kind of in Saving Private Ryan, that kind of poise under pressure? And when everyone else is losing their minds, you're able to stay calm and keep it simple and take that next step forward. Were there insights you learned along the way that you apply now on the job?
Yeah. One big thing that I learned in the military as I progressed through these leadership positions was, when you are a leader, your attitude is what your guy's attitude is going to be. There is no doubt about it. If you walk into your company headquarters or your platoon office or whatever, and I'm angry and I'm irritable and I'm really upset and just flustered, every single one of my guys is going to be flustered because they look to me for that calmness, that poise, that direction. So I had to refine this throughout my years of being a leader, but I ended up getting pretty adept with it. And no matter what was happening in my personal life, in my work life, in my whatever was going on with me, when I walked in, I was not overly bubbly smiling, but I was, good morning, how are you? How's it going? And it was very calm, cool, collected. And then if there was an issue with any of my guys, if any of them were having a bad day, it's not as likely to affect other people when I still remain calm. So it's that. And then another thing that I really adopted in the Army and brought into 84 and the civilian world in general is the concept of servant leadership. And this is what helped me, I would say, progress pretty quickly through the ranks of the Army. I made staff sergeant in 5 years, and I also ended up getting promoted in 84 on the earlier side. It's the concept that you work for your guys. Loyalty goes both ways. Your guys do what you tell them to, and they work with you, but you also owe them that loyalty right back. Whether it's for their well-being, for their job performance, for whatever, you take ownership of that and you try to do everything you can to help them.
I think that's such a powerful message, because when we think about organizational charts, or maybe we're thinking of the military, which is command and control, top down, this whole idea that, no, my name's Zach, I'm here, I run the show. My job is to show up every day and help you do your best, achieve your potential, achieve your dreams. Have you ever found that some people have struggled to understand that, no, wait a minute, I report to you, I'm here to work for you, when you're saying, no, I'm here to serve you, that will help lift all of us up?
Oh yeah, I've had that conversation countless times because first off, in the Army, whenever I got promoted, I would be moved units, whether it was just to a sister company or a sister battalion. They don't want you to get promoted and then be around the same guys you would hang out with as a junior enlisted soldier or as a junior NCO. So there would be plenty of times where I would show up to a new company, new battalion, new duty station, and I would, just be myself. I didn't put on a facade or anything. I'd just talk to the guys and let them know I'm here for them and ask them what I could do for them and what their expectations of me were as a leader. and they would kind of be like taken aback almost. They'd say, well, what are you saying? And I would be clear, be like, what do you expect from me as this new position? And they would say, like, I've never really been asked that before.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I've had that conversation a multitude of times.
I think whenever you in a leadership role have a conversation with someone and hear from them, I've never been asked that before, that's probably reason to believe you're on the right path.
Yeah. Yeah. Most people, when they ask me that, it kind of takes me back at first, because I honestly just wish that, they would have been asked that, because that's not, number one, that's not how the military should work. And, it's not that old school kind of yell and get in your face and you work for me and what I say goes. You got to be a team. If you're not a team with your guys, you're setting yourself up for failure as a leader. They're not going to perform. They're not going to want to work for you. They're not going to be nearly as effective, and you're not going to accomplish your mission.
Yeah. You might have answered part of this, but I'll ask anyway. When I think about leadership and the ability to develop trust efficiently and yet authentically, I was just speculating. You go to boot camp and then you move up. And to your point, every time you get promoted, you're going to a different place. You're constantly meeting new people. I'm sure you are meeting people all across not only the United States, but then you're overseas, you're meeting different people from different cultures. Is there anything that you haven't touched upon so far that you've learned about developing trust quickly, but also doing it in a way where they don't feel like, okay, he learned this in some book. He's trying to build rapport in a way so we have a connection where it's inauthentic?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that develops trust like that, when you get to a new unit or you're overseas, like you said, with coalition forces, whatever nation they may be from, it's shared suffering. That's what they teach you in basic training and advanced individual training. And then throughout various training exercises while you're at permanent duty stations and also deployed. I mean, being deployed is kind of a self-explanatory thing. It's an austere environment. It's pretty crappy food. It's not in general a happy time. So, and it's not that it should be like that, but it's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. And I've noticed that will build camaraderie, that will build trust quicker than any team building exercise will. And now I know 84 doesn't go on deployments or anything, but you still have long work days. You have busy work days. You have deadlines to meet. You have there's a good bit of stress with the job, with trying to hit quota and trying to sell enough. So that kind of gives it a little micro taste of what that is. And so it's a little bit of a parallel. And what I would say in regards to being authentic, and like you were saying, to where the guys don't think like, oh, he read a book and now he's trying to get along with us. It's just for me, it was being a little more on the reserve side. I wouldn't really, talk too much. I would ask the guys, what do you expect from me? What can I help you with? What can I do for you? But then I'd pretty much leave it at that. And I would also kind of let my actions speak instead of my words. So if there ever was an issue brought to me, whether it was personal or work related, I took care of it immediately. If there was an issue in the platoon or the squad or the team, it was addressed immediately. So really, it's not talking the talk, it's walking the walk. It's showing the guys that you're proficient in your job, you're proficient in being an NCO, and you're proficient in doing your duties, taking care of them, accomplishing the mission. I should say that's what turned a lot of new faces to me into longtime friends.
Yeah. This idea of shared suffering, I'm not sure I've ever heard it or really thought about it that way, but I think we've probably all experienced that to some degree, where we are together with a small group and we have to engage in something that everyone agrees isn't great. No one's really happy to be there. You got to slog through it, and good does come from that. So how do we think as leaders situationally, how do we approach this, knowing that yeah, this might suck in the short term or maybe in the medium term, but we as a group can get significantly closer because of it, is an interesting idea that I'm just kind of thinking about here. Maybe let's transition here, Zac, to an area, I'm going to be honest, I was somewhat fearful of even bringing up just because I have no idea what the hell I'm talking about and I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I thought this might be a good stand-in for our audience as well. You transition back from Afghanistan, you end up in Fort Bliss in Texas, and there was over some time, the recognition there was post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Can you, for me and for our audience, maybe just talk in general about kind of maybe what you felt, and then how we can, if there's other people like me who feel generally clueless, but I want to be intelligent, I want to be compassionate about it. Maybe can you give us a little context of what you went through and how you can help educate some other people like me?
Yeah, of course. The first thing I'd say is that when symptoms like post-traumatic stress develop, it's different for every person. It's not any certain set of trademark symptoms, because no two people are the same. So no two reactions to traumatic or dangerous stimuli are going to be the same. I can speak for myself, where when I got back from Afghanistan, initially I had the mindset of, oh, I feel really on edge. I'm a little anxious, but that's normal. I kept telling myself this is normal. I just got back from a deployment. I'm still settling in. I just need to readjust and I'll be good. But for me, as time went on, I started to feel a very strong sense of like hypervigilance almost, you would call it. You're just very on edge, very like I said, anxious, and that didn't go away over time. Whereas I thought it would. I thought it would kind of wear off. I would get back to quote unquote normal, and I'd just move on. First off, that didn't go away. Second off, I started to, feel a pretty depressed mood a lot. Okay. And I had never had any issues with depression or anxiety before this time. So it was a little different for me to feel that. I almost was like wondering, like, why do I feel tired? Why do I feel lethargic? Why do I just feel sad? Like what is this? And why am I at the same time on edge and anxious? Like I was truly learning what was happening, because I was very fortunate to not have that as a childhood kind of ailment or anything like that. And so those two persisted. And because they persisted, I started to lose sleep. And losing sleep is what I now learned is one of the most unhealthy things you can do. I used to think, oh, if I just have a couple bad nights of sleep, I'll be good. I'll be all right. Just shake it off. But I was starting to not sleep every night. So it would be in and out of sleep for a couple hours at a time. And then eventually my alarm clock would go off and I'd get up for the day. Now, when you lose sleep, not only does it affect your physical processes in your body, it affects your mental. So when I started losing sleep, I was really just overly anxious during the day. The depression symptoms were getting worse, and I would start beating myself up. I would start saying, like, come on, like, what are you doing, Zac? Get out of this. Get out of this mindset you're in. I called it a funk for a little bit. I'm in a funk. I just got to shake it off. And one thing that I ended up doing, which was probably 6 months after Afghanistan, 6 or 7 months, I started drinking a good bit. And so initially it was like very social, recreational, but then it ended up getting couple more drinks a night, couple more, and it just started getting pretty severe. And so when you combine the lack of sleep with the pre-existing anxiety, depression, and what I now know is post-traumatic stress and insomnia with that substance abuse, it's a recipe for disaster. You're in a very, very dangerous cycle that is just never ending. And so when I finally ended up reaching out for help, I did it, and people could tell, like, you know, when you looked at me, there was something wrong. Like, I wasn't sleeping, so I had bags under my eyes. I was very nervous, very fidgety, very quiet, and people knew that I was not myself, because all the way up until this point, I was pretty calm, cool, collected. I was pretty well spoken, pretty squared away guy. So when people like leaders, peers, subordinates saw me like this, they knew like something's going on. And so I ended up receiving treatment for both the substance use and post-traumatic stress. It was a combination of therapy, medication, and peer support.
Okay.
Which I would say was a very good combo to get me out of that cycle of being, you know, it was essentially damaging myself. So they got me the treatment I needed. I went to a very good rehabilitation program in Utah. It was called Strong Hope. Amazing behavioral health rehabilitation. So that was a 28-day treatment center. And then I continued treatment. And it was at that point that myself, my command team, and my medical team all decided, like, it's probably best if I move on from the Army. Maybe it's not the most healthy thing for me.
And maybe just talk a little bit about how was that transition from leaving the military and entering the civilian life, knowing what you had just gone through?
Yeah, it was very, you know, it was nerve-wracking in its own way. You know, I had the post-traumatic stress from Afghanistan, which was difficult enough because I was going through that. And then they finally made the decision, and I did as well, to be medically retired.
Okay.
And so this brings a whole new realm into this world of, you know, this life I knew for 7 years and honestly loved for the most part was what it was. Their days were numbered. So I knew, like, it was about a 6-month process from when they started it to when I got out.
Okay.
And it was very nerve-wracking because I was still in uniform and I was still getting a paycheck. So I was good, and I was not, you know, I wasn't drinking anymore, and I was doing the right things, working out. But I knew that eventually I'd have to figure out what to do when I signed that DD-214 and I left Fort Bliss. So when I was in like my probably 2 to 1 month window, like truly getting ready to leave, and it was very real in the near future, moving out of my apartment, getting everything packed up, I knew that I wanted to go back to Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Because that's where I'm from. That's where I was born and raised. That's where my family is. So I ended up moving in with one of my brothers, and he lives in Crescent, Pennsylvania. And it's to this day, it's indescribable how much of a state of shock that was when I ended up leaving the Army and moving to Crescent, PA. It was something I had never experienced before. The true realization that it's done. You know, I was in not this, but civilian clothes. I was in, you know, Crescent, PA. There's no military bases around there. It was so foreign to me. Yeah. It was difficult.
At what point did the idea come to A, write a book about your experience to help other people, and B, and this is me more thinking about my own relationship with my father and our ability to collaborate on a book together. Talk about that process and where in kind of this journey did that happen?
Yeah, so me and my dad always had a great relationship, and he has been a professor at St. Bonaventure University for a little over 20 years now.
The Bonnies.
And so, the way it happened was actually while I was in Afghanistan in 2019, he was granted sabbatical to write this is his 4th book. And so he was granted sabbatical to start writing it. So as he was brainstorming what he wanted to touch on, because he's a professor of sociology and psychology, so all of his books are around that subject. And so he was starting to brainstorm his book just as I was going through Afghanistan and then coming back from it.
Okay.
So he hadn't reached out to me about this until I would say March, April of 2022. Because I was still adjusting to civilian life. He didn't really want to throw like, hey, let's write a book on my plate, because we were also kind of learning that we were still on the journey. The journey wasn't over. It was about March or April of 2022, and we had a couple phone calls, and he said, I'm trying to write this book. I'd like to touch on post-traumatic stress and also the concept of post-traumatic growth. So two different facets. And he asked me, like, would you like to write it from an experiential perspective, whereas I write it from a educational perspective? And at first I had to think about it for a little bit, because it was still very, very fresh, very new in my mind. And I was still kind of easing my way out of the beating myself up over it and, being somewhat shameful about it. But I ended up, he ended up just telling me to write some words on some pieces of paper. Just write about what you feel, what your journey's been. And he said, and it has helped me just to write it down a little bit, just to journal, to keep a log of what I've felt these last 7 years, and now coming out of the Army, and now I'm trying to make my way in the civilian life. So I started doing that. I'd write a couple pages at a time, and I really didn't put much thought into it. I just kind of, it was my experience. I wasn't teaching anybody anything. I wasn't narrating on a certain situation. I just typed out what I felt. And he did a really masterful job with it, because as I was typing these pages, I would send them to him like, yeah, here's this, like, this is from this point. This is from, Afghanistan after Afghanistan, or this is how I feel now at home. This is how I feel adjusting to the civilian life. As I was sending him these, he was writing the educational piece, where he delves into referencing the DSM-5, and he references articles and journals in it. And so the book ended up being kind of going back and forth, but with a good flow of what are the symptoms of post-traumatic stress, what predisposes people to post-traumatic stress, and then also ways to help cope with it in a healthy way, and what the concept of post-traumatic growth is. And now post-traumatic growth is an even newer concept than post-traumatic stress, because the general public is starting to be aware of what PTSD is. It's not a foreign subject. They know what it is. They may not know what a person looks like if they're going through it, or what to do to help them, but they know what it is. Not many people have been aware of what post-traumatic growth is. And so it kind of goes back and forth, and it goes through both the symptoms and the treatment of post-traumatic stress, and then leading towards post-traumatic growth.
Okay. Well, I can imagine that was a powerful miniature journey. I don't say miniature. Writing a book is not miniature at all. But just a really unique experience that probably built a further bond with your father.
It did. Me and my dad have always had a great relationship, and he followed, like, obviously he was a part of my journey with everything as a father.
Sure.
I'd call him anytime I wanted to talk or vent or ask any questions about, because a lot of it was very nerve-wracking, even as I was going to get treatment, going to really acknowledge that I needed help and getting better. So he was there for me all the time as a dad. He's always been there, just like my mom's always been there for me as a mom. So when we decided to write the book, it was a little different, but he was still there as a dad. It was never like, all right, I'm a co-author now.
Right.
This is what I need. No, it was a lot of fun writing it with him. And it's kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity. The way that the timing worked like that, as he's granted sabbatical, I'm in Afghanistan. It's almost like you could write a movie about it. That's what one of the professor that did the foreword for the book is. That's what he said. You could write a movie about this stuff. Yeah. How coincidental that is.
Well, and I can imagine just what a gift, not only have a father who's obviously invested in your health and happiness, but then also have this deep domain expertise in sociology and psychology, which one could argue those would be the two most important things for someone kind of transitioning out of the military like you were. So to get that combination, yeah, whether it's divine intervention or coincidence or whatever it is, that's an incredible story.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and just made me really grateful for both of my parents. They're the best people I've known, and they just continue to prove that. I have everything for them to give thanks for.
Yeah. Well, take us through maybe a little bit about two things, kind of how 84 originally got on your radar, which, being from Pennsylvania, I'm pretty sure it's impossible to grow up or pass through for any period of time Pennsylvania and not be aware of 84. Yep. So that part a little bit, but also about the management training program. I'm curious to what any context you might provide, because I think there's broad recognition that the management training program within 84 is the best in the business and is known when you get someone, you run across them and they've been at 84, whether they're still there or they've gone on to some other journey, that if they have that training, they have now elevated and probably accelerated through their career faster than others. Maybe just any sort of context on that.
Yeah. So the way I ended up crossing paths with 84 was, as I was living with my brother in Crescent, I would go to a gym in Evansburg, which was about a 10-minute drive away through a little state highway, simple drive. And as I was originally out of the Army, very fresh, first few weeks, I would drive back and forth to this gym each day. And the 84 Lumber in Crescent sits on a hill and that you can see from the highway. And it's a big plot of land that it's on. So I'd see the 84 ball. Yep. I would see the shed, the lumber sheds, the showroom. And I didn't think anything of it at first. I just kept seeing it. And I'd see it on the way to the gym and on the way back from it. So I realized that, hey, I still need a job. I still want to keep myself occupied. I want to do something. I want to make a living for myself. And I thought, I see this place every day. It's about 2 minutes away from my brother's house, because it wasn't. Like, if you take a right out of his driveway and then you take another right, 2 miles down the road was 84.
Okay.
And I ended up putting my resume in on Indeed, and the recruiter called me pretty much the next day. And he talked to me about the management trainee position and also 84 Lumber as a whole. Gave me kind of a rundown on not only what the company is, but what the path is like for a manager trainee. And I ended up having an interview 2 days later with the manager at Crescent, Andy Spangler, and I started the next week.
Wow.
Yep. It was about a week process from when I put my resume in to when I started. So yeah, I started on March 22nd of 2022.
Okay.
And I will start by saying I have no prior construction experience whatsoever. I wasn't a handyman. I was an athlete when I was a kid, and I was a combat medic in the Army. I've never built anything. I, didn't know the difference between OSB and plywood when I started. I thought it was all the same thing, and one just looked weird.
Yeah.
And so I started as a manager trainee, and with the training that they give you, not only with the different camps that you can go to, the more formal training, everybody in the store or any 84 store are some of the most knowledgeable people about product knowledge, customer relations, running a store that you'll ever find. So you're not only getting trained at these different formal training opportunities that they have, but you're getting trained really every day. And every time a customer walks in, my first couple weeks, I learned something new, because they're all getting different things. Crescent stocks a huge variety of products like insulation, shingles, lumber, drywall, siding. So I would learn something new literally every time somebody walked in the door.
Yeah.
And not only would I learn because I have to go find the thing and load the customer up, my fellow MTs, my co-manager, the manager, salesman, everybody in the store would teach me about it. And that's kind of part of how we kind of grow our own at 84. I was willing to put in some pretty long hours of hard work because as a manager trainee, you're kind of doing a little bit of everything, and it's not all very gracious work. A lot of times it's hard work. But the fact that I was willing to put in those hours and really do whatever I was told, they taught me really a lot of what I know now about product knowledge, how to sell, how to negotiate, how to conduct yourself as a businessman. And it only furthered as I went on to be a co-manager and then a manager at my first store and now the manager at this store. Almost like with each person you meet at 84, you learn something new because everybody has different experiences and where they come from and where their path's taken them. And the thing that I've realized is that we're all here to see each other succeed. Mm-hmm. So, why wouldn't you teach somebody? Just like I teach guys at all my previous stores and this one, it's the culture of seeing each other succeed and being happy for them that really sets us apart.
Yeah. So, Zac, before we go here on July 25th, so in a couple weeks here in 2024, people, Zac, of course, will be listening to this for the next, 500 years. But in the year 2024, on July 25th, we've got National Hire a Veteran Day going on. So 84, you guys are going to have a call center. Maybe a little bit more context from you. When is that happening and what's happening with it?
Yeah, the call center is going to be open from 10 to 12, and any veteran will be able to call in and ask about some opportunities to come work with us and see where the career can take you.
Well, hey, I think this is a great spot to end here, Zac. I appreciate you making time, but I think more importantly, too, as someone who is extremely grateful and thankful for the freedom and the liberties I get in this country, and I think a lot of people now have really recognized over the past 50, 60, 70 years that while Americans' presence across the globe has increased, the number of people that are actually doing that work is shrinking. And it's a very small number of people like yourself who've made that sacrifice. So I want to say thank you, man. And I'm thrilled you are a part of this industry. And I appreciate you making time because we need all the talent we can get, and finding people like yourself to come in, and kudos to 84 for finding a way. And I'm sure they stumbled upon like a diamond here. I'm like, yeah, no wonder we should hire you in a week. Why wouldn't we? Right. So I think sharing your story has helped. I know it helped me and the rest of our industry in a multitude of ways. So for that, I want to say thank you.
Hey, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be on here and chat.
All right then, friends, how did that go? Hopefully you enjoyed my conversation with Mr. Zac Elenchin. And if you are interested in learning more about some of the tactics 84 Lumber uses to attract, hire, onboard, and retain veterans, just Google 84 Lumber and veterans, and you will see articles from HBS Dealer, LBM Journal, GI Jobs, PR Newswire. So 84 does quite a bit to not only use the megaphones they have available to attract new talent that is coming out of the military, but also, I think, provide a roadmap for other companies who are interested in doing the same. Zac and I did not discuss it here, but early in my career in the early 2000s at Pulte Homes, we collaborated with a Army recruiter, and we ended up getting 6 or 7 extremely talented ex-military folks who came to the job site, and their work ethic and focus and ability to lead and to develop trust on the job site was immediately transferable. For us on the culture side, it was kind of a shock for us civilians to have all these folks who had served. And it was a fascinating experiment of sorts, but it was unbelievably successful. And if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you have heard the voice of one of these gentlemen. His name is Jack Kennedy. He went to West Point, was in the military, now lives in Los Angeles and is a writer and actor out there. And we have remained close. And that is where our two worlds collided when Pulte started bringing in all these veterans who had all these talents. And I remain friends with many of them today. All right, then, friends, that's all I've got. We will close out with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.